Hey everyone, and welcome back. We all have those things that make us kind of nervous, those things we shy away from. Well, today we're tackling one that might resonate with a lot of you. The fear of speaking English.
It's a really common one for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. So we're diving deep into this podcast script called Breaking the Fear of Speaking English. And, our goal here is to help you become more confident, more fluent, just really own those conversations. Let's turn those nervous stumbles into confident strides. How does that sound?
I love that. It's definitely something you can work on and improve.
Right. So the script, it highlights four main reasons people kind of freeze up when it comes to speaking English. Fear of making mistakes, fear of judgment, and then there's just that lack of confidence thing, and of course, overthinking, just getting stuck in your head. Would you say those are pretty universal experiences?
Oh, absolutely. And the psychology behind each one is really interesting. Let's take the fear of mistakes, for example. It's almost primal.
Primal, like
But
deep down.
Exactly. Our brains, particularly this area called the amygdala, they're wired to avoid errors. Think about it. Way back when, mistakes could mean danger, right? And that instinct, it's still with us.
So even if messing up a verb tense isn't like a life or death situation, our brains react as if it could be.
Exactly. It's like our internal alarm system is a little bit overzealous when it comes to language. But the thing is, with language, mistakes, they're essential for growth. Think of a child learning to walk.
They fall down a lot.
All the time. They stumble, they fall, but they get back up. It's the same with speaking. We learn by trying, making those errors, and then correcting ourselves.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the fear of judgment? I imagine that can feel pretty intense.
It can be really tough. And societal pressures, cultural backgrounds, they play a huge role. Some cultures, they put more emphasis on perfection than others, which can lead to learners feeling extra self-conscious about making mistakes.
I can see that. But isn't some level of accuracy important, especially like in professional settings? It's not just about avoiding judgment, right? It's about being understood and being taken seriously.
You're absolutely right. There's a difference between accuracy for communication and accuracy for, like grammatical perfection. While clear communication is essential, aiming for absolute perfection, well, it can really hold you back. It can be paralyzing. It's about finding that sweet spot, prioritizing getting your message across effectively, while also acknowledging that, hey, occasional errors are natural.
Okay, that's reassuring. What about that lack of confidence thing? I think a lot of us struggle with that. It's so easy to compare ourselves to fluent speakers and feel like we're just not good enough.
Comparison is a trap. It's crucial to remember that everyone's language journey is unique. Some people, they have more exposure to English early on, others have different learning styles, and so on. The key to building confidence is to focus on your own progress, not on comparing yourself to others.
So instead of like beating ourselves up for not being perfect, we should celebrate those small wins, even if it's just learning a new phrase or having a short conversation.
Exactly. Every step forward is a win.
Yeah.
And sometimes overthinking can be just as bad as that lack of confidence. We get stuck in our heads trying to create the perfect sentence, and poof, the moment to speak passes us by.
It's like we become our own worst enemies. Is there a way to quiet that inner critic and just speak more freely?
There is. It starts with shifting our mindset from fear to fluency. The podcast script has this great analogy, a child learning to walk.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that.
Right. They stumble, fall, but they get back up again. It's about embracing that process, being okay with imperfection. We need to let go of that need to be perfect. Remember that people care more about the message than minor grammatical errors. Think of English as a tool for communication, not a test to be passed.
So we've talked about that mindset shift,
Yeah.
from fearing mistakes to really embracing the learning process, accepting that mistakes are, just part of it. That seems really helpful, but I think a lot of people get stuck on like where to even practice speaking English. It can be so intimidating.
You're so right. Finding that safe space, that comfortable environment to practice is key, especially when you're first starting out. The good news is it doesn't have to be anything fancy or complicated.
That's good to hear. The podcast script suggests starting small, low pressure kind of thing. And they list a few ideas: talking to yourself, recording yourself, joining some online communities, and finding a speaking buddy. What do you think about those? Which one seems the most effective?
Well, they can all be beneficial.
Yeah.
It really depends on your personality and how you learn best. Let's kind of break each one down and see what clicks for you. Talking to yourself, it might sound a little silly at first,
I can imagine.
but it's a fantastic way to get comfortable with the sounds of English, to build fluency without that fear of judgment hanging over you.
Yeah, I can see that. It takes the pressure off, right?
Exactly. It's like having your own private rehearsal for real-life conversations. You can practice different situations, try out new vocabulary, even experiment with different accents or tones of voice. Another great one is recording yourself. This allows you to really hear how you sound and pinpoint those areas where you can improve.
Do you have any tips for using recordings effectively? Because I could see it being discouraging to hear yourself making mistakes.
That's where the growth mindset comes in, right? Focus on the progress, not perfection. Listen for those patterns in your errors. Are you tripping up on a particular grammar rule? Are you mispronouncing certain sounds? Once you've identified those areas, you can really target them in your practice. Plus, over time, you'll get used to hearing your own voice in English, which can do wonders for your confidence.
That makes sense. Okay, what about online communities? Are there specific platforms that you recommend?
Oh, there are tons of great resources online. Apps like HelloTalk and Tandem can connect you with language learners from all over the world. You can text, have voice calls, even video chats. It's a fantastic way to immerse yourself in the language and practice with native speakers or other learners.
That sounds so much less intimidating than, trying to strike up a conversation with a stranger in person.
For sure. Online communities offer that supportive, encouraging environment where you can connect with people who get it. They understand the challenges. You can also find groups on Facebook or Reddit based on your interests. That way you can practice your English while talking about things you're passionate about. And then there's the classic speaking buddy. Having someone who understands the ups and downs of learning English can be incredibly motivating.
It's like having a cheerleader in your corner, right?
Just exactly. You can practice together, hold each other accountable, and celebrate each other's wins. It's also a great way to build friendships and connect with people from different cultures. Remember, the key is to find a method that feels good for you, that you enjoy. The more you enjoy it, the more likely you are to stick with it. Now, let's say you found your safe space, you're ready to practice. What are some practical tips to make the most of it?
Well, the podcast script talks about keeping things simple and clear, especially when you're starting out. They use this example of simplifying a restaurant reservation request. Instead of trying to craft some elaborate sentence, you can just say, "Can I book a table at your restaurant?" It gets the message across without getting bogged down in complicated grammar. I think for a lot of people, there's this feeling that they need to sound super eloquent to be taken seriously. Do you think there's a misconception that, simpler language isn't as effective?
I think there's often this pressure, especially for those learning English as a second language, to prove their proficiency, like they have to use big words and complex grammar. But in reality, clear and concise communication, that's way more valuable. Simple sentences are easier to construct, which reduces that cognitive load and allows you to focus on expressing your ideas clearly.
It takes the pressure off of having to be perfect, right? And if you're less worried about making mistakes, you're more likely to actually speak.
Exactly. And, simple sentences can actually sound really natural and fluent, especially when you use them strategically. They help create that smooth flow in your speech, and they reduce the risk of making those grammatical errors, which ultimately boosts your confidence.
That's such a helpful way to think about it. It's encouraging to know that you don't have to be a grammar whiz to communicate well. All right, what about those awkward silences, when you're trying to think of what to say? I know I'm definitely guilty of that.
Those pauses, they're totally normal, and there's a great tool you can use to deal with them. Fillers. Words like, well, let me think, or even just, those are all natural parts of spoken language.
So we don't have to be afraid of those little pauses or try to fill them with, some eloquent prose.
Not at all. Fillers serve a purpose. They signal to the listener that you're still thinking, still processing. They prevent those awkward silences and keep the conversation flowing naturally. They actually make you sound more like a native speaker because they're part of how people really talk.
That's interesting. So we've covered mindset shifts, safe practice spaces, simple sentences, and even fillers. Sounds like we're building a pretty solid foundation for confident English speaking. But how do we take that next step and actually use these skills in the real world?
That's where it gets exciting. It's time to step outside that comfort zone and explore some real-life scenarios where you can apply everything we've talked about.
Okay, we've laid the groundwork, but I think a lot of our listeners are probably wondering, how do I actually use this stuff? How do we go from practicing in our little bubble to having real conversations out in the world?
Right, that's the big question. And the answer is, like most things, start small. The podcast script suggests a few scenarios that are probably pretty familiar. Things like ordering food, asking for directions, or even just striking up those small conversations with people you encounter.
Those are things we all do, but they can feel so scary when you're not confident in your English. Any advice for tackling those situations? Let's start with ordering food. We've all been there, staring at a menu in a foreign country, feeling totally lost.
It can definitely be overwhelming. But remember, you don't have to be a gourmet chef to order a meal. A little bit of prep can make a huge difference. Before you even go out, practice some basic phrases. I'd like to order, can I have the, things like that. And really focus on pronouncing the names of dishes you might want to try.
That's a great tip. Sometimes I think we get so caught up in the fear of messing up that we forget about those simple things. What about asking for directions? Even in my native language, I sometimes struggle with that.
Asking for directions can be tricky, even for native speakers. Keep it simple. Find a landmark you recognize and try something like, "Excuse me, can you tell me how to get to?" Don't be afraid to use your hands, point or gesture to help people understand. Most people are happy to help.
Okay, that's good to know. What about the small conversations? Just the thought of approaching a stranger makes me nervous.
Small talk is all about keeping it light. You don't need to get deep and philosophical. Start with something basic, a comment about the weather maybe, or, "Excuse me, do you know what time it is?" Just make a quick connection. Practice your speaking in a low-pressure situation. Smile, make eye contact, listen to what they have to say. You might actually enjoy those little interactions.
So it sounds like the big takeaway here is start small, be consistent, and build up that confidence over time.
You got it. Every interaction, no matter how small, is a victory. It's proof that you can communicate in English, that you're moving forward.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the main message for our listeners who are trying to get over this fear?
When we put all these pieces together, what we're really talking about is changing how we think about speaking English. It's not about perfection. It's about being able to use it, feeling good doing it. It's about seeing language as a way to connect, to express yourself, not as some big test you have to ace. And it's about enjoying the process, not being scared of where you might end up.
I love that. It takes the pressure off and lets us focus on the fun part, learning and talking to people. And speaking of the journey, this source really emphasizes celebrating those small wins.
Oh, absolutely. Each time you order a coffee in English or ask for directions or have a quick chat with someone, take a moment to acknowledge that. Celebrate your progress. Use it as fuel to keep going.
Those little wins can feel so big when you're fighting that fear and self-doubt. It's like, hey, I can actually do this.
They build momentum, it's a positive feedback loop. The more you celebrate your successes, the more you want to keep pushing yourself.
So as we close out our deep dive, what's one practical thing our listeners can do today to start putting these ideas into practice?
A good first step is to pick one of those safe practice techniques we talked about. Just 5 or 10 minutes talking to yourself, recording yourself speaking. It doesn't sound like much, but it can really add up over time.
And if they're feeling brave, what's one small step they could take to, step outside that comfort zone?
How about ordering your next coffee in English? Or asking a shop assistant for help finding something. Those little interactions, they can really boost your confidence.
It's all about starting somewhere, taking that leap of faith.
And remember, fluency is a journey. Be patient with yourself, enjoy the ride, and don't ever give up on that goal of speaking English confidently.
This has been such a great deep dive. We've looked at the reasons behind the fear, we've busted those myths about needing to be perfect, and we've given you some real tools to help you practice and feel more confident. Remember, you have everything you need to succeed. The key is to take action.
The world is waiting to hear what you have to say, so go out there and speak your truth.
And that wraps up our deep dive into conquering the fear of speaking English. We hope you found it insightful, encouraging, and most of all, empowering. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep speaking your truth.